Chapter 7. The Architecture of Silence. Waking up was like surfacing into a room where someone had turned all the sound off at the wall. The first thing I felt was weight, my body anchored to the bed by tubes and tape and the thick drag of anesthetic. My chest rose and fell, but the breath felt wrong. It wasn't moving the way I remembered. There was a tightness at the base of my neck, bandages, a stiff, foreign pressure. I tried to swallow. Pain flared, sharp and immediate, like glass snagging in tender flesh. My hand moved before my mind caught up, fingers going to my throat. I touched the dressing, hard edges under gauze, a small circular protrusion in the center, stoma, the new doorway. Memory came back in a rush, the date, the consent forms, the gowned walk down the corridor, the last thought, goodbye, before the world collapsed. I opened my mouth. Air slid in and out, but when I tried to make sound, nothing came. Not even the broken rasp I'd woken with after previous surgeries. No hoarse whisper, just breath. My lips formed the shape of a word, hey, maybe, or hi, out of habit. Silence. I tried again. Nothing. It wasn't a block. That old, infuriating pressure was gone. The command went from brain to tongue and met. Absence. No resistance. No vibration. Just a space where sound used to begin. Panic bloomed, fast and hot. I scrabbled at the bed rails, fingers clumsy. A nurse appeared in my field of vision, her face kind and calm in a way that made me want to scream, not that I could. "Hey, hey," she said softly. "You're okay. You're in recovery. Surgery's done. Can you hear me?" I nodded, too fast. She smiled. "Good. I'm going to lift your head a little. There you go." She raised the bed a fraction. The room tilted. "Don't try to talk," she said gently. "I know you'll want to, but you need to rest your throat. You've got a stoma now. That's how you're breathing. We'll explain everything, I promise." Don't try to talk. For years, try to talk had been the quiet instruction humming under everything I did. Try, push, attempt. Now it was a prohibition. She handed me a small whiteboard and a marker. "Can you write?" she asked. I nodded again, slower this time. My hand shook as I took the marker, fine motor skills blunted by the anesthetic. I forced my fingers to wrap around the plastic. The board wobbled against my knees. I scrawled, messy and oversized. Did it work? She leaned in to read, then smiled. "Yes," she said. "The surgeon will come by and talk to you properly, but from what I've heard, he's very happy with how it went." I let that sink in. The cancer was out. The price had already been paid. I stared at the words I'd written. They looked like a child's hand, letters wandering up and down, the line of the question mark shaky. My first sentence in the new world was silent. The architecture of my communication had changed overnight. Voice gone, pen and plastic in its place. The nurse wiped the board clean, ready for the next. "Your family is in the waiting room," she said. "We'll bring them in once you're properly settled on the ward." Another flare of panic. How do I talk to them? I wrote, slower. "I can't talk at all." She read. Her expression softened. "You will," she said, "just not with your vocal cords." "They're gone, love. But there are ways. We'll get you seen by speech therapy in the next day or two. They'll show you things." I swallowed the lump in my throat, carefully, aware of the rawness. In the hours that followed, time lost shape again. They wheeled me up to the ward. Machines bleeped gently at my bedside. IV lines dripped. A drain snaked out from under the bandages on my neck, collecting dilute red into a plastic bottle. Every breath was a reminder. Air in, Air out, not through my mouth, through the small, perfectly round hole in my throat. At some point, Mum and Dad appeared. Mum's eyes were puffy. Dad's jaw worked like he was chewing on something invisible. They hovered at the door for a second, as if uncertain whether they were allowed in. I raised my hand, a small wave. Come. Mum reached the bed first. Her hand went straight to my face, thumb gentle at my cheekbone. "Oh, love," she whispered. Dad stood on the other side, his big, familiar hand wrapping around my forearm. I wanted to say, "I'm okay." I wanted to say, "I'm scared." I wanted to say, "It hurts like hell, but I'm still here." My mouth opened. Reflex. Silence. It hit me in a new way then, harder than in recovery. Not just an absence of sound, but an absence of the attempt. The old pattern, inhale, tense, push, stumble, force, was gone. I could go through all the motions and be met with nothing. It was like muscle memory reaching for a doorknob that had been removed. Mum's face flickered at my mute mouth, but she caught herself, forced a smile. "You got through it," she said. "We're so proud of you." Proud? For lying here, full of stitches, attached to machines. I reached for the whiteboard, hand clumsy with painkillers and fatigue. "Hi," I wrote first. It seemed important to start there. Mum laughed, a short, wet sound. "Hi," she said, voice cracking. I erased and wrote again. "Hurts." Dad nodded. "I'd be worried if it didn't," he said. "Means they did what they needed to, yeah?" He was trying to joke. It didn't land quite, but I appreciated the attempt. "Can't hear myself," I wrote. Mum read it and swallowed. "I know," she said, "but we can still hear you, in other ways." It sounded like something from a pamphlet. I could tell she believed it, though, or wanted to. Dad squeezed my arm. "You don't have to say anything," he added. "Just rest. We'll sit." And they did. For long stretches, we didn't talk at all. They sat in the uncomfortable hospital chairs, flipping through magazines without turning the pages, glancing up whenever I shifted. Their presence was a kind of language. "We are here. We see you. We are not going anywhere." I realized, in that enforced quiet, how much of what passes for conversation is just noise. Filler words, automatic responses, verbal tics. Here, with speech cut away, every gesture, every touch carried more weight. Mum stroking my hair away from my forehead, Dad standing up every time a nurse came near, as if ready to block any harm. Their eyes constantly checking, "Are you in pain? Are you frightened? Are you bored?" I started to reply with small movements, a thumbs up, a grimace, a slight shrug. Later, when the pain meds eased enough for my brain to work a little clearer, I used the board again. "I sound like nothing," I wrote. Mum frowned slightly. "You sound like you," she said. I tapped my throat. Shook my head. She put her hand over mine. "You are still you," she insisted, "even when you can't, make noise." I wanted to argue, to tell her how much identity had been tangled up in the sound, however broken. Instead, I wrote, "How are you?" She blinked. "I'm okay," she lied. "Worried, but okay." Asking how she was felt like a small reclaiming. The cancer, the surgery, they'd all made me the center of attention, of concern. Writing that question on plastic was a way of saying, I still care about other people. I still think outside this throat. The hospital days blurred into each other. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, changing dressings. Physios taught me how to cough through the stoma without blowing stitches. Respiratory therapists showed me how to clean it, how to humidify the air I was now drawing straight into my trachea. Each new instruction was another brick in the architecture of this strange, silent life. On day 3, a speech pathologist arrived. I almost laughed when she introduced herself. Speech. The word felt like an old joke now. She pulled up a chair. "I'm Emma," she said. "I'll be working with you on communication and swallowing over the next little while." She spoke gently, but not as if I were fragile glass. I appreciated that. She set a folder on the table. "First," she said, "I want to say, I know this is huge. Losing your larynx is not a small thing. It's okay if you're angry, or sad, or numb, or all of those at once." I nodded. She glanced at my notes. "I see you had a speech impairment even before this," she added, "and epilepsy. You've had a few battles." Battles? That barely covered it. I scrawled on the board, "Spent life trying to talk. Now I can't." She read it, met my eyes. "I'm not going to pretend that's fair," she said. "It isn't. It's cruel, and it sucks. No platitudes, no everything happens for a reason." I felt something unclench in my chest. She went on, "What we're going to do now is not about fixing that unfairness," she said. "We can't. It's about giving you tools, workarounds, ways to express what you need, what you feel. They won't be the same as before. They might be slower, but they're real." Tools, workarounds, old words in a new context. She pulled out a laminated sheet with an alphabet printed on it, large and clear. "This is a low-tech option," she said. "Partner-assisted spelling. You look at or point to letters, and your communication partner says them out loud, building the word for you. You nod when they've got it right." I raised an eyebrow. She smiled. "It's not fast," she admitted, "but it's something. You also have your whiteboard, and your phone. You can type on that if it's easier. We'll also, later on, add voice prostheses, electrolarynx, esophageal speech. But for now, we start simple." She held up the letterboard. "Want to try?" she asked. I shrugged. Why not? We did. She pointed to A. I shook my head. "B, C, D." At E, I nodded. She said, "E, F, G, H, I, J, K." I nodded. She said, "K." "Ek," she mused. "Is that right so far?" I nodded. "Any more letters?" she asked. I shook my head. "Ek," she repeated. I tapped my chest, gave a tiny half smile. "Ah," she said, understanding. "Okay." She got it then. "Okay," she said, properly. "You did okay." It was clunky. Slow. But it was a word in the air that had started inside me. I hadn't moved my mouth. My throat hadn't played along. But my intention had made it out. It was a strange kind of relief. In the days that followed, I started using everything I had. The whiteboard became an extension of my hand. At first, the writing was huge, all caps, awkward. With practice, it got smaller, neater. I found shortcuts, arrows, underlines, a shorthand between me and whoever I was speaking to. I learned to tap my chest and then point at someone else to mean me, you. I mimed. Hands became verbs. A flat palm rising and falling. Breathe. Fingers walking across the sheet. Go. Palms up. What can I say? There was grief in every gesture, but also, to my surprise, a strange, quiet creativity. I'd always envied people who could talk with their hands, those naturally expressive types who seemed to have an extra channel of communication built into their wrists. Now, necessity forced me into that language. At first, friends and family fumbled. They'd look at the whiteboard, then at me, panic flickering behind their eyes. "What are you trying to say?" they'd ask, too quickly. I'd feel that old, familiar frustration rise. "If you just waited, I could show you." We both had to learn. They had to learn to pause, to give me space to write or mime without narrating the process. I had to learn to simplify, to let go of perfect sentences. It became an odd mirror of my stuttering days. The world slowed down now. Not because it had decided to be kinder, but because silence forced it to. At my bedside, conversations rearranged themselves. People stopped talking over each other because they could see how easily I could be left behind now. They asked yes-no questions when I looked tired, open ones when I picked up the marker, hungry. They began to read my face more closely, a raised eyebrow, a slight smirk, a wince. Even without sound, I realized, my body was always broadcasting. It always had been. It was just that before, the noise of speech, everyone else's mostly, had drowned it out. Presence had weight here. Just being in the room, making eye contact, nodding at the right moments, became its own kind of statement. I'm listening. I'm with you. I'm not afraid of this silence. Some people surprised me. The mate from the pub, Josh, came to visit. He hovered at the door, obviously unsure. I motioned him in. He sat, hands restless, eyes darting to the dressing at my throat and away. After a bit of small talk, his side all sound, mine all nods and scribbles, he blurted, "I don't know how to do this, man." I wrote, "Me neither." He laughed, startled. "Fair enough," he said. We muddled through. At one point, I wrote, "You talk too fast anyway." He read it, then snorted. "Yeah," he said. "Been told that once or twice." We fell into a rhythm. He'd say a bit. I'd respond with a word or two, or a face. Slowly, he adjusted his speed, waited for the marker, watched my hands. After an hour, he said, "You know, this isn't as terrifying as I thought." I raised an eyebrow. He coughed, embarrassed. "I mean, you're still you," he said. "It's weird, yeah, not hearing you, but I can still, I don't know, get you." I wrote, "Good. I wasn't that chatterbox before." He laughed again, eyes wet this time. Later, when he left, he squeezed my shoulder, firm, grounding. "See you soon, yeah?" he said. I nodded. Some people couldn't do it. An old acquaintance from work visited once, stood at the end of the bed like he was at a viewing. He spoke loudly, too loudly, as if volume could bridge the gap. When I wrote a response, he glanced at it, smiled weakly, and changed the subject. He left quickly, saying, "You'll be back to your old self in no time." I knew, and he knew, that wasn't true. He couldn't sit in the new architecture. He needed the old noise. I didn't ask him back. Sometimes the silence felt like a cage. In the middle of the night, when pain spiked or fear surged, I'd reach for sound like a reflex. A groan, a swear, a call for the nurse. Nothing. I'd smack the call button instead, breath rasping quietly through the stoma. When the nurse arrived, I'd point frantically at the pain scale chart, hold up my fingers. She learnt to read my face, eyelids tight, jaw clenched. Okay, she'd murmur, adjusting the drip. The powerlessness was raw. Not being able to call out, to name the pain, to curse it, to say enough, made me feel younger and more helpless than any seizure ever had. At least, during a seizure, I wasn't aware of the moment I lost the floor. Here, trapped but conscious, I felt every unspoken word like a stone in my chest. But in that same bare place, other things grew. Writing, for one, took on a new urgency. As soon as they let me, I pulled my notebook out of my bag. My hand was clumsy at first, the pen heavy, lines wobbled. I had to pause often, throat aching, lungs adjusting. Still, I wrote. Fragments, observations, things I couldn't be bothered to scribble on the whiteboard in full, but couldn't let go. I wrote about the way the nurses' eyes softened when they realized they'd have to wait for me. I wrote about the strange intimacy of someone cleaning your stoma, gently wiping the edges of the hole that now housed your breath. I wrote about how my internal voice, as loud and precise as ever, was beginning to feel like a second person living inside my quiet body. The page became a place where I could let that inner voice run at full speed. No stutter, no block, no cancer, just thought to ink. I'd always used writing as a backup, a way to say the things that got lost in rooms too fast for me. Now it became primary. Spoken language had been confiscated, written remained. People started to hand me their phones. Text me, they'd say, even when they were in the same room, if it's easier. Sometimes we'd sit side by side, me typing, them reading, then replying out loud. It was an odd hybrid conversation. Half physical, half digital. But it worked. It gave me back some control over timing. I could craft a sentence, delete, retype, before it landed in their hands. The old frustration, that gap between a fluent internal monologue and a reluctant mouth, flattened out on the screen. Here, finally, the two matched. The architecture of silence wasn't empty, it just had different rooms. Touch was one of them. With my voice gone, physical contact became a main line, not an afterthought. A hand squeezed 3 times, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. A forehead pressed briefly to mine when words would have cracked. A hug held a second longer than usual to say what take care never quite covers. I found myself initiating more, tapping someone's arm to get their attention, resting my palm on Mum's back as she washed dishes, a silent thank you. My relationships shifted. People who were comfortable with that kind of closeness moved closer. People who had always relied on banter, on verbal sparring, didn't know where to put their hands now, and drifted. In the quiet, small details stood out. The way my brother sat on the hospital bed, careful not to jostle tubes, and nudged my knee with his like we were kids again. The way a nurse, seeing me struggle to reach for the water bottle, simply moved it into my hand without commentary, respecting the small autonomy of doing the rest myself. Presence became a form of speech. One afternoon, a week or so after surgery, I caught my reflection in the small mirror they'd given me to check my stoma. I saw the bandages, the swollen skin, the raw pink circle just above my collarbones. I saw the faint, tentative scar forming. I saw my mouth closed. I thought, you are quieter than you have ever been. And then, surprising myself, I thought, you are also, in some strange way, more visible. Before, my pauses could be misread as reluctance, shyness, nothingness. Now, no one could mistake my silence for indifference. It was written on my body, stitched into my throat. People leaned in now, literally and metaphorically. They waited for my pen. They watched my hands. They watched me. In being forcibly removed from the constant noise of everyday speech, I could see its shape more clearly. How much of it was filler? How much of it was power? How much of it was fear of silence itself? We're taught to be afraid of gaps. In conversations, in relationships, in broadcasts. Dead air is failure. Here, in this new architecture, silence wasn't empty. It was a room where other things could happen. A look, a gesture, a written word slid across a table. It was slower. It was harder. It was, in its own brutal way, honest. I wouldn't romanticize it. There was nothing inherently noble about not being able to shout when you dropped something on your foot, or call "wait" when a nurse misunderstood your scribble. There was nothing poetic about choking silently on phlegm at 2 a.m, slapping the call button with frantic fingers. But as the days turned into weeks, as the incisions healed and the new habits settled, I started to understand something. My voice had always been an architecture of compromise, built around dysfunction, built through effort, built despite impatience. Now, stripped of that facade, I was being forced to construct a new one. Hand by hand, word by word, touch by touch. And for the first time, in a way I had never fully allowed myself before, I was learning that silence itself could be a kind of structural support, not an absence, a frame, a way to hold everything up when the old walls had been removed.